my name's Sara Williams and I'm one of the careers consultants here in the team at Newcastle. And today, hopefully everybody's in the right place. I'm going to talk to you a little bit around about breaking into the engineering sector. So I'll cover a little bit about the job market, but also some things that you might want to think about in terms of your preparation for not just today, when you're talking to employers as well, but kind of a little bit further down the line if you're kind of meeting employers, hopefully on campus in the not too distant future as well. So what I wanted to start off with, it might seem a little bit of a strange start, but I did just want to kind of start with the overall view of the job market at the minute. And I'm starting with kind of the overview of the job market because I'm sort of moderately aware that particularly over the past year, there's been what I would say a pervasive negative press, particularly around about graduate level jobs and whether that's internships, placements or graduate level roles. And, you know, obviously the impact from COVID-19, you know, that has impacted certain sectors. But the really good news about that is that we're starting to see not just a reverse of that, but also hiring in the UK has kind of surpassed pre-COVID levels. So not are we only back to kind of where we were in terms of hiring people pre-pandemic, it's actually kind of gone past that as well. So the jobs market is quite buoyant at the moment. And as you can see, the graduate sort of level roles are becoming in a little bit more demand to kind of, you know, help get things up and running again. So hopefully starting on a positive note there as well. And the other thing as well is that all of the employers here today to speak to you because they have got opportunities. So the employees that come to our fairs, particularly these fairs, are here because they are actively recruiting, whether that's internship, placements, or graduate level roles, which again, all good news. Quick facts about the engineering sector, which I thought were really interesting. It's one of the UK's broadest sectors. So you can see over 5 million people work in employment in an engineering capacity, and that accounts for 18% of all UK employment. So it's such a big sector, which means that there's lots of kind of great opportunities in there. I think this is really interesting. So engineering has got a key role in driving economic growth and productivity, generating, wow, 1.2 trillion pounds of the UK's turnover in 2018. That's such a huge number. And if you think about, I'll talk about this in the later slide, but you know, you've got some of Europe's biggest kind of engineering projects sit within the UK. So you've got things like Hinkley Point, the Thames Tideway tunnel, and what's HS2? How could forget about HS2 as well? All these really kind of big ticket projects that are kind of happening. So really exciting time to be in the engineering sector. And the good news just keeps on coming, guys. So it's estimated that the industry will need 200,000 skilled engineers by 2024. So for those of you who are going to be rolling off your course at that time, great news for you. And obviously there'll be, you know, a need to kind of plug that kind of skills gap right the way through, whether you're in first, second or third year here today. So yeah, all moving in the right direction for engineering, which is, yeah, all positive news. The other thing that I just wanted to include here as well is kind of the future of the engineering specifically in the UK. And again, coming back to that piece around COVID and just some reassurances really around about kind of the future of the sector, particularly within the UK. So Dr. Hilary Levers, who's the CEO of Engineering UK, has recently been kind of quoted saying that engineering has been quite resilient to the impacts of the pandemic, and as we've seen there, can only kind of become stronger. The government's plan for jobs seeks to create thousands of jobs in things like new infrastructure, decarbonisation. You know, we've got the big climate summit coming up. And if you think about that, engineers are going to have to play like such a critical role in being able to kind of deliver this in the future, not just now, but moving forward. So again, really exciting time to be involved in projects that can make a really long lasting impact, not just on the UK, but also globally too as well. So why engineering? I mean, I imagine a lot of you doing engineering anyway as your course discipline, but some of the reasons why people choose to go into engineering as a discipline. So as you might imagine, you know, a lot of these projects kind of quite geographically dispersed. But thinking around about, there are actually quite a lot of diverse environments that you might be able to work in. So if you're somebody who might not want to spend a huge amount of time behind a desk, then there is that opportunity to kind of get out there, work in kind of different environments and kind of a slightly hands-on nature as well. And one of the great things about kind of careers in engineering, or if you're somebody who likes learning and wants to kind of continue that learning journey, I'm sure lots of you will be aware around about the continued professional development opportunities with engineering on the kind of the road to sort of chartership or becoming incorporated. So again, lots of opportunities to kind of, you know, the learning will absolutely not stop at university. That will kind of be expected throughout your career as an engineer. Salary, how much are you going to get paid? Always a burning question that I think a lot of people have. So looking at a couple of different surveys, they all come out at slightly different levels, I would say, but your earnings could start anywhere kind of between sort of the high 20s and sort of early 30s for kind of a starting role. And obviously that increases over time and can increase quite significantly as well. And as we've just looked at in the kind of the previous slides there as well, I imagine lots of you will kind of, you know, be thinking around about as an engineer, you're building those skills, particularly in problem solving and design, but the creativity piece, if you think about some of those, like some of the world's most kind of challenging problems that engineers are going to have to kind of contribute to, really is going to have to be able to kind of foster that sort of creative mindset as well. And again, if you think about where projects are, sometimes they are in towns and kind of, you know, sort of dense geographical areas, but also depending on the nature of the job, travel. And I think particularly if you become a chartered engineer from a UK perspective, potentially international travel because of the recognition that kind of chartership has globally as well. So potential for you to kind of move around a little bit if that's something that you're interested in. Now, one of the challenges that sometimes engineers have is it's almost kind of a paradox of choice it can become. So if you're doing like a really specialist discipline, then that kind of might put you down kind of a path, but there's over 40 different areas that you could potentially go into as an engineer. And sometimes it's kind of that paradox of choices there. Is there too much choice potentially? So this is sometimes a question that I get asked a lot as a careers consultant. And some of the things that I would get you to kind of challenge yourself and think about is, okay, what are some of those things that we've just gone through there? So what type of environment do you want to work in? What type of problems do you want to be solving? Is chartership important? Is that something that I want my employer to help me with or support me with? What would the day-to-day of the work look like? Travel, we've already talked about, there is potentially opportunities to travel, but that's not for everybody. So is that something that you kind of want to be incorporated or not into your next role? And more broadly, have you got kind of an understanding what is going to be kind of important for you when you're moving into your sort of next sort of professional role as well? So looking at that, what kind of skills are employers in the sector looking for? These are just some examples. So again, when you're speaking to some of the employers today, what you'll probably find is that different employers will be looking for different things. So this was just a survey of a number of different engineering companies, and the survey asked, you know, what sort of skills and behaviours they're looking for. So I mean, I think some of these probably, yeah, quite common across lots of different job roles. So particularly on the technical side, obviously there's kind of, you know, that sort of tick in the box for sort of your technical knowledge. But if you look on the right side as well, the Simpsons, I think sometimes students find a little bit surprising in terms of what an employer might be looking for. Perhaps you become a little bit too focused on that kind of technical piece. To get a job in some of these big engineering firms, it won't just be looking at your kind of technical aptitude, it will be looking at the kind of the range of skills. So things like your communication, your teamwork, obviously lots of project management competencies that kind of come into engineering type roles as well. And the last one around about commercial awareness. Do you broadly know what's happening in the sector? Do you know about how certain events might kind of impact on what's happening within your particular sector within engineering? And all of these things might be tested throughout the recruitment process. So again, back to Dr. Hilary Lever, CEO of Engineering UK. I've put this quote in here as well because I think it's really important to recognise that not just in engineering, but in so many different sectors, this piece around about digital skills is becoming incredibly important. So, you know, if you're on first, second or third year, thinking around about what that might look like moving forward, are there any opportunities for you to enhance digital skills? And the other thing as well that is, again, it isn't just engineering, it isn't just an engineering problem. This is something that kind of happens across a number of different sectors. But this piece around about being able to think and work across sort of traditional disciplinary boundaries is something that's becoming increasingly important. So when you're out in the world of work, that you're not just kind of working in silo in your kind of little section within a company, but you're kind of working, you might be working across a number of different kind of functional teams in order to kind of deliver a project. And again, that might be something that you want to think about your time at university. Often, you know, you get to work in your kind of your bubble of kind of engineering and on a team and projects, which is great because that's going to be fantastic for building up your teamwork and communication skills. But what opportunities have you afforded yourself to work with people kind of from outside of your discipline area as well? So again, something just to maybe think about throughout your time at university, amongst the many of the things that you have to think about. I just wanted to briefly touch on what is the kind of the competition like within engineering for roles. This isn't the highest in terms of sectors, so banking, finance, retail, FMCG tend to kind of have higher levels of application. So according to a recent survey, the average number of vacancies that engineering companies are getting for graduate roles is around about 51, for internships 35, and for placements around about 43. Again, not the highest that we see in terms of industry. And why I've put this in there really is that I'm sure you guys know that there is competition for jobs out there, but this isn't to put you off applying, because you can't be considered unless you put an application in, but really to think around about the quality of your applications and what's going into them. Are you taking time over them? Are you even coming to the career service to speak to people like myself to make sure that you're putting in a solid application when you are applying for roles in this sector? Again, you might have seen this before if you've come to any of my induction presentations in engineering, but what you might see in terms of kind of typical timelines, and this, I would say that this is quite common across internships, placements and graduate roles, is that you'll probably see that there's a big application period window around about now that runs up until kind of usually around about the Christmas period. And lots of vacancies will close at that point in time. You'll probably see the continuation of those vacancies being live until potentially the February or March time as well, excuse me. And then moving on into kind of the summer period, there might be kind of fewer vacancies remaining. What this doesn't mean is that if you don't get a job now, then that's kind of, you're not going to get a graduate role. It is just to highlight that there are a higher number of vacancies available at this time of year, typically as well. I often get asked around about like how long can you apply for graduate schemes after graduation. This might be really employer dependent, but from kind of my experience on the employer side of things, you've usually got around about sort of 1 or 2 years post graduation to apply for graduate schemes as well. Again, just coming to kind of a typical application process, this is obviously going to be different on each organisation that you apply to. But this is kind of like a typical kind of funnel in terms of how the process might be kind of set up for you to kind of get that hired thumbs up from the employer. And really it was just to say that we do offer support at every stage of this process. So obviously we check CVs and applications. You have access to psychometric tests online through the just on the open source kind of career site and through My Career. We can practice interviews with you. We do have a practice platform called Shortlist Me, where you can practice some of the pre-recorded video interviews that employers are asking for as well. So again, if it's anything to do with the recruitment process, come and speak to us about it as well. And we've usually got kind of a level of support for you from that respect. So just jumping to today and what's going to happen sort of further on. And, this, as I said before, might be things for you to think about if you are at any employer events that are on campus, or even anything that you go to kind of online throughout the course of the year. Just things that you might want to think about or ask employers when you're kind of coming to these events. It was always good to kind of come prepared with a couple of questions. So if you are coming to any of the panel events later on today, maybe have like 1 or 2 questions kind of in your back pocket to ask, something kind of burning question that you kind of want to get off your chest and kind of ask these employees, because this is your opportunity to do that. Sometimes people kind of ask like, why is that important? Well, one, they're the people who can give you the kind of the best insight into their organization. 2, if you are writing CVs and applications and cover letters, well, probably more cover letters and applications, you can absolutely reference these conversations that you're having at careers fairs in terms of where you've built your knowledge from, which can reflect your motivation to want to work for a company as well. So some typical questions that you might want to ask somebody at these type of events are about the work, the day-to-day activities and what that looks like, how might the work change over time, particularly if you're on like a graduate scheme, the workplace, so the culture of the organisation, how big is the team that you might be going into, any impending changes. Again, training and development, thinking around about that chartership, is that something that's important for you? Do they support that? Is it important for them? You know, is it okay if you've got a B-Eng versus an M-Eng, or have they got any other opportunities outside of those kind of degree disciplines as well? Experience, do they require any kind of previous experience, or are they happy to kind of look at your where you can evidence skills and behaviours from kind of any sort of background or any experience that you've got? Other things, obviously skills and attributes are needed. That's important because you'll need to be able to evidence them throughout the recruitment process with them. You can also ask employees about their experiences. You know, what do you enjoy most about working at this company, or what do you feel is the most unique aspect of working at this organisation? You know, all great questions to ask employers. And the other piece as well, thinking around about that, you know, back to some of the things that employers are looking for, that commercial awareness piece. Okay, so what are the most important issues and developments that are happening in your organisation? You know, what are kind of some of the bigger outside influences, impacts that you're seeing that are affecting your organisation? Again, all going to add to your kind of commercial awareness and things that might be able to kind of help and aid you throughout the recruitment process. So top tips, these aren't, I would say these top tips anyway, but I don't want to take credit for these. I found this really great blog on Target Jobs, and these are top tips from students who were studying engineering and are now working in the field. So I felt it was, you know, not just coming from me in terms of what I would say to you, but top tips from people who've been in your position. They're working potentially in roles that you'd like to, and what are they saying to you now in terms of their tips for you while you're still at university. So I think the first one should be, you know, we've talked about timelines and things like that, so hopefully should be kind of quite obvious in terms of applying early. But again, thinking about my point of that if you don't get something on this cycle of recruitment, there will be other opportunities. And I think, yeah, you know, you might want to focus on getting you good grades, and yeah, kind of applying to these as soon as you can, obviously appreciating all of the other pressures that you folks are under at the moment as well. So the other thing as well is that, you know, we've got probably some of the biggest engineering companies coming to talk to you guys today. And that's great. And they've got so many amazing opportunities. But also, I read a statistic that said that I guess the biggest volume of engineering roles are actually in small to medium-sized enterprises as well. So when you're doing your research, you might kind of want to think around about beyond some of the big names and absolutely apply to them as well, because their schemes are fantastic and you'll get great training, but also potentially kind of consider some of those small to medium-sized businesses too as well. Non-engineering experience can boost your CV. So if you're thinking around about some of those skills and behaviours, back to that list that we were looking at earlier, so things like communication and teamwork, that doesn't necessarily have to come from an engineering internship. It could come from a part-time job that you've done, any volunteering that you've done, any other internships that you've done that might not be kind of engineering related. But thinking more broadly around about where you were able to kind of demonstrate those skills and behaviours as well. I think be positive and passionate. Obviously, you know, the past year and all of the challenges that's brought. I think reading into this, what they kind of mean is that if you go into a recruitment process and you're applying for jobs and certain parts of kind of the engineering sector that you're naturally more energized about, this is probably going to kind of come across a little bit more in those kind of interviews and assessment centres, which again could really kind of help demonstrate your motivations for the sector and the company in the role. We've already talked about this, so preparing properly for applications and interviews. So that's, doing your research into the job description. For some of the main employers that you want to apply for, is there anybody that you can speak to at that organisation? So think around about using LinkedIn alumni, think about using NCL Spark, which is our alumni tool. But is there anywhere where you can really gain that kind of deep insight into what that organisation's about that might help you in your preparation for your applications and interviews as well? And obviously come and speak to us. I think that's a given. Research the industry that you most want to work in as well. Again, it seems like a bit of a basic one, but different industries have kind of got different things that are kind of going on and different challenges. So being able to kind of research quite deeply the industry that you want to work in. And again, that might be online. You've got some great resources, through the university where you can start to research industries. But also, again, who you've spoken to, who might be working in these organisations and kind of tell you more. I think the caveat to that being is like, don't get obsessed with an ideal job. I think absolutely, if you've got your dream employer that you want to work for, work hard to put those solid applications in and potentially get hired by them as well. But I think, early in your career, typically when you're looking kind of careers sort of across a lifespan, very much thinking around about what exposure you're going to get to building skills and knowledge and how might that be supported. So don't get too tied down with that kind of idea of the ideal job. As we've talked about already, engineering roles sort of exist in most places, really. So if you are able to consider different geographies, that might potentially kind of open up different opportunities to you as well. I appreciate not everybody can have that flexibility. And the other thing as well is that where you can get feedback on unsuccessful applications. Now, this might not be so typically an employer, so again, from my experience as an employer, you probably won't get feedback on things like CV, cover letter, application form, or even some of the psychometric or recruitment tests. Normally you'd be able to kind of get feedback sort of in the later stages, perhaps at an assessment centre or at an interview stage. But it is really important to get that feedback. I know if you've been knocked back from a job, it's not the first thing that you really want to think about doing is saying like, why did you reject me? But it could be something really simple that you could kind of work on. So just trying to adopt a little bit of that kind of growth mindset and think about, okay, I didn't get it this time. What can I do to put myself in a better position next time around? And last but not least, it's not what you know, it's who you know, is the old saying. So again, this is just a little bit of a nod to kind of networking and kind of thinking about who can you speak to in organisations to find out more, to really kind of get that in-depth knowledge either about, the recruitment process, what they're looking for, or industry or kind of commercial awareness as well. So all things that I would say, but tips from previous students who've studied engineering. Just a really quick reminder on who we've got coming up this afternoon and this morning as well. And again, these are some of the biggest names in engineering. So hopefully you're really excited about going and speaking to some of these organisations. And do just as a reminder from the career service perspective, we will run other events throughout the course of the year. So please check My Career for kind of any other Employer Connect events that we'll be running moving forward. After today, obviously reflect on what you've learned. If you're interested, apply. And if you do want to find out more, start making those connections. So websites, social media pages, NCL Spark, which is our alumni tool, and obviously LinkedIn as well. Just a bit of a plug for some other events that we've got coming up. If you are interested in doing a placement, we are running an event on the 8th of November. If you could sign up for that on My Career, that would be wonderful, just so we know how many students are coming. This event, you'll hear from all students who've done a placement year last year, and they'll be talking to you about their experiences. So if you've kind of got some questions for them, if you want to work for any of these companies, you can talk to them about their recruitment process, what the placement was like, possibly to kind of quell any concerns that you've got. 3rd of November for any marine students online today. Oceans of Opportunity is back on the 3rd of November. You don't need to sign up for this, but I'm sure you'll get further comms about that. And these are some of the employers that have kind of confirmed and potentially confirmed for that. And then also the other one I haven't got a slide for, if there's any civil engineers on the call today, just a reminder, I think it's the 18th of November that you've got your access event as well. that's it from me. That was a little bit longer than I expected, so I'm going to stop sharing there. So I've got a question in the chat box, which I'm going to go through. So somebody has asked, what is a placement, and what is the difference between a placement and an internship? And can I get a graduate role after placement? So there's 3 questions there. So let's kind of unbox all of that. A placement is a term that you might get called, you might see it as a year in industry or a sandwich year. A placement is typically around about 6 to 12 months long. Any undergraduate student at Newcastle has got the opportunity to put a placement year in their degree. And if you go onto the careers website, so if you just Google Newcastle University careers and have a look on the list there, we've got a whole host of information about placements. We do encourage you to register for one if you're interested in it. That means that there's no obligation for you to do it. It just means that we can give you kind of the right information, flag timelines, etc., and things like that. So 6 to 12 months with an employer, you effectively kind of extend your degree by a year. But what that means is that some employers use placement years as kind of a recruitment tool. So effectively, from an employer's perspective, you can do 6 months, and it's effectively an interview for that period of time. So sometimes you can be offered for that. An internship tends to be just a shorter period of time. So anywhere, I would say, from a few weeks up to a few months. Normally, people tend to do internships during like the summer break in the UK. We do have NCL internships. Again, if you have a look on my career under vacancies, we've had a couple of engineering ones lately, and you can do those kind of part-time during your studies. And then the last question is, can I get a graduate role after placement? Yeah, sometimes those organisations will offer you to join. So typically you do a placement in your penultimate year. So from a university's perspective, if you're going to do a placement, so if you're doing one of the other questions is, can a postgraduate student participate in a placement? If you're doing, they typically at Newcastle, they are only for undergraduate students. It doesn't mean that you can't apply for a placement year, like once you've finished with an organisation. You just have to be aware that some organisations will want to specifically target penultimate year students because they use that as a recruitment tool. I think I answered that question. Any other questions? No? Okay, all right, I can see a few people dropping off there. So guys, I hope you really enjoy the event today. We've got such an amazing line of organisations coming. So I'm going to stop the recording now. I'll stay online for a little bit longer if anybody kind of wants to message directly, but otherwise, yeah, enjoy meeting these amazing employers today, and thanks so much for your time.